Now, you may have noticed that while we've been talking about education for young people, the average age in the room hasn't necessarily reflected the target audience. And so we thought for this final session, we might try and change that slightly. And we are joined by Princess Laurentien from the Netherlands, who will be hopefully magically appearing. Fantastic, lovely to see you, who I've heard speak before in Hong Kong. And to introduce her and to introduce the session, let me now hand back over to Lucy. Lucy.
Thanks, Julian. And going back to our discussion earlier this morning about power dynamics, this is where we all cede power to the brightest minds in the room, to the experts who are here to guide us. And I'm delighted to introduce Hugo, Tendi, Caroline and Rosa, who are going to be providing their reflections and reactions to Princess Laurentien today. And I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce Princess Laurentien, who is a social entrepreneur, who is the UNESCO Envoy for Literacy and Development, and is someone who has been really committed to bring through young people's voices as the experts. And that's what resonates so powerfully for us at CAMFED, and which is why we're thrilled to have you here with us today, Princess Laurentien. So without further ado, I will pass over to you to be able to share your remarks and reflections with us, and then we'll invite the participants here in the room with us to be able to respond back to you.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I'm really happy to see you, albeit on screen, but perhaps I'll also be talking about that a little bit. And Rosa, Hugo, Caroline, and Tendi, I hope I'm pronouncing your names right. I'm so happy to see at least some of you with something to write on. What I'd love to do is just to give about 15 minutes of my thoughts and what I've picked up over the last over 2 decades almost of speaking to teachers and to children and to young people and students. And I'd love you to then help me reflect and pick out what you think is important, or where you don't agree, or where you say, but it's actually a little bit different. So I'm counting on you to listen and to pick up ideas and thoughts where you say, well, wait a minute, this is different, or yes, I agree with that. And then we can have a dialogue with you and with the room. And then hopefully it all brings things together also that you're discussing already. So is that okay with you? I see you. Yes, no? Yeah. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Are we in it together? Top. Okay, good. So basically, I'll be reading my thoughts aloud, and then let's have a conversation. And so basically, the thinking is indeed, as Lucy said, the whole idea, who is the expert? COVID-19 is a worldwide crisis with huge consequences for people as well as systems around the world. This new reality may feel overwhelming, maybe even crippling, but every cloud has a silver lining. When all is in disarray, no one needs to feel they have all the answers, because clearly no one does. In crisis, it is acceptable to have more questions than answers. In crisis, there is no room for not invented here. In crisis, we should all be learners. Sadly, COVID-19 forces millions of people around the world into survival mode. But we also know that in looking for ways to adapt to the new reality, we need to get into questioning mode. The new reality amplifies and uncovers the urgency of implementing ambitions voiced already through the Sustainable Development Goals that you may know, which are by the United Nations. So let's not forget that the call for structural educational reforms predates COVID-19. How many conferences have we attended to discuss the role of digital technology in complementing teachers and materials? How many reports indicate that learning is not just about grades, but also about well-being? And how many pleas have been made by students themselves about what they truly need for learning to be meaningful for their development now and in the future. They want to have fun what they learn. Now is the time to carry through the changes that were already starting and staring us in the face before COVID-19 was in our midst. So the time is there to rethink who is the educational expert. Should students, teachers, policymakers, and academic experts not co-create as equals at every stage? As I've advocated for so many years, students themselves are the educational experts. Those shaping educational goals should learn to translate their real needs into programs, not just the other way around. We should listen to children and young people and take them seriously. Talk to you, look you in the eye and take you seriously. And not just the ones who are eloquent, but equally the silent and shy ones. And during COVID-19, I spoke to many teachers and many students, particularly because we were living in a time where everyone was finding out what is going on and how should we go about organizing education. And two quotes stick with me. Many teachers said, "We don't like the situation. This digital world is not our world." But many students said, and also the ones who are not always happy in the educational system, "I quite like the combination of online and offline. Teachers should do the different things online as they do offline, but they should always remember that they're just people in their living rooms, not just teachers, and that they should do offline and online." Real progress starts with admitting that being confused is okay, that no one has all the answers. And this sentiment that the teacher said, "This is not my world," uncovers a deeper fear for the unknown, that the online learning world that reshuffles the roles of the learner and the teachers. Young people are wired differently. They're wired today. The online world is for you so much easier than dinosaurs like myself. I'm 55. It demands different skills from teachers in terms of energy, ways to connect with students, and approach to transmitting knowledge. And it lays bare, in my view, that learning is much more than a transmission and a reception of knowledge. That learning is about an experience. It has to be fun. It has to give you energy, because then your brain will switch on and say, "I want to know more." And in between the lines, the quote of the teachers uncovers a reluctance to ask for help, let alone to do so from those best equipped to give advice on how to deal with this online world, students themselves, because you are wired differently in the online world. So in my perspective, this is the time to reach out to young people what to do and not to do to make their learning a life-changing experience, not a mechanical transaction. When all is new, there's huge opportunity for students and teachers to find out together what each other needs from the other. And I call this the principle of reciprocity. We tell you, young people, to be curious, to ask questions, be inquisitive. Adults in questioning mode set a great example for students. As a questioning teacher is more of a role model than a teacher only showing how much he or she knows. And what's more, learning together shares the burden of responsibility, which always, in any situation, makes a task much lighter, much easier, and a lot more fun. Now is the time for teachers and students to ask each other the right question for this new learning world, to share what they need and do not need from each other, to learn to read needs in between the lines, to show real interest in the other. Where do they need support and where do they need freedom? What makes them feel seen and heard? And many times students tell me, and again in this COVID times, sometimes it takes days for teachers to connect with me. It feels like sitting in the classroom with my hand raised in class for days. This statement is an opening to understand what she would truly need to be motivated in her learning process. While teachers and students may need different things at different moments in the learning process, both have new needs. It is time to embrace the new reality and apply the principle of reciprocity. It will open up opportunities and address restrictions. By learners and teachers co-creating learning processes together, this new reality of offline and online learning becomes our world. And something else that really struck me that as particularly students have told me over this last period, the question of the transition back to school. What does it mean? Who defines what the problem is? And who defines what actually going back to school means? Is it the traditional educational experts? Is it policymakers, headmasters, teachers? Do students and teachers just go back to the school buildings, but in a suboptimal 1.5 meter situation? Is it really our plan to go exactly back to the way it was before? Or should we really think, what is the transition back to school? I believe that this crisis should be our final wake-up call on educational reform and the need for reciprocity between teachers and students, and of course, headmasters as well. Young people today are not the same as when, as I said before, when I was 55, when I was at the time in your age in school, the world looked differently and I was different. And therefore, education was connected to the time that I was a young child. COVID-19 should be the final push we need to put into practice what we actually already knew about changes in our educational systems. If we don't act now, when will we? Are we brave enough to take the giant leap forward and brave enough to rethink some of the very basic notions? What is school? What is school for? Filling buildings and classrooms with students, following the curriculum and aiming for good grades? Or is it for fulfilling the dream that all children have the opportunity and space to develop the knowledge, mindset, and skills in a way that suits their needs so that they become active, happy, and successful citizens? And to conclude, children and young adults have become even more aware of the world around you. I'm so impressed with how you look at the world. Your motivation and engagement are even more important now that their learning process partially takes place outside of the traditional school building. And you've been telling me for years, students like yourselves, take us seriously. We see us as people. We're young, we need a lot to learn, but so do the adults. We can only shape education through dialogue, I believe, between adults and young people. Invisible glitches become visible and learning becomes positive. A student said, see students as whole persons. They are more than just their grades. By re-evaluating who is the learner and who is the teacher, by establishing a relationship based on trust between teachers and students, by focusing on relevant topics from real life issues that really interest young people, and by building the bridge between students and the world outside of the school building, are these not ingredients that we need to shape our educational systems based on the motivation of young people and children, and not from what we believe top-down young people need to learn? And to conclude, learning is about discovery, asking questions, and openness towards new things. That's what we ask from young people. Let's go all back to that, and the rest will follow. See young people as equal and take them seriously. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Princess Laurentine, for sharing those reflections and around the thinking about their transition back into school and how we might want to think about education differently. So I'm now going to pass, if it's okay with you, to each representative here in turn to be able to share a reflection or a question back to you. So Hugo, if I could start with you.
Thank you very much. You were talking a lot about the transition between online school and back in the classroom there. And unfortunately for a lot of us here, that's not been so straightforward as going straight back to the classroom because COVID cases have been rising and a lot of isolation and stuff like that. But what I would say is I think really nothing compares to the classroom. So while online learning can be useful, I think really the way we can make progress in education is in the classroom, because there's no way you can share the same you're talking about the people, not just the learning. And when you're online, it's really just the learning and not the people. Whereas when you're in school, it's much more about the people than just the learning. So, while I think, moving towards online in some cases is really important, I think for all of us sitting here, we'd much prefer to always stay in school.
And Hugo, I have a follow-up question because I've been doing a lot of research and speaking to a lot of, everyone is different. So the four of you have a certain feeling and perception, but there's also a lot of children, and I'm really pleased that you want to be in the classroom. So it's really not about me professing one way or the other is better. I'm really talking about that there's a lot of young people who are actually happy to not always be in the classroom. So I think the key question is really also about how do we make sure that all children who have all different needs all feel happy. And the four of you want one thing and other children, they feel better in another way. So it's really indeed also about the diversity of needs, I guess.
Yeah,
I was talking about.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think it's also about balance because obviously some children, it's impossible to come to the classroom and then online learning becomes really important. So I absolutely agree with you. And I do also think that you're absolutely right, we need to talk to young people more, because I think especially when we started to try and work out how to learn online, that was a bit chaotic. Well, I say a bit. But we... obviously we improved, and I think that was in a lot of cases because of the dialogue between the students and the teachers.
Thanks very much, Hugo. Tendi, do you want to come in and share a thought or a reflection to Princess Laurentine?
So I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So some children, they may find learning boring, but would there be any possibility how you could make learning interesting?
Well, actually, I think this is a really good, that's, I think, the essence of what I'm saying. And I would actually pass it back to you. What would be the questions to ask of children? I can't tell you what is boring, not boring. So what are the questions to ask to the children who find learning boring, to understand what you need to do for it not to be boring, if you see what I mean? What are the questions we should ask young children, young people?
Because like you were saying, sometimes the teachers don't actually, they think that students, it's all about getting good grades. So students never really have the time to become curious or ask a question. So that's what I'm trying to say here, that it sometimes can be a bit boring when the only thing you need to get right is the grades.
Yes. So do you have some thoughts and suggestions of how that could be less boring? And I see that Hugo very much agrees with you. So,
I'm not sure if I have any suggestions,
Okay, but this is exactly the kind of dialogue, I guess, that we should have. But it's a really good point, and I think it's important that adults hear this from you, that this is what's happening. Because if I can ask a follow-up question, what happens when you find something boring?
Well, if you find something boring, well, personally, I normally just zone out or I don't listen to it. And then normally, especially in class, if I don't listen, then when I'm actually supposed to be doing the learning, then I forget what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes. So I think education is about understanding and appreciate and actually saying, okay, this is when I zone out, and to take that seriously and to find good ways for you not to zone out. We want you to be thinking, wow, this was a great experience. Really good point. Thank you.
Thanks, Tendai. Caroline, if I can pass to you.
So I think a lot of the time learning feels very abstract, especially learning about what's going on in the world, in the classroom. For example, climate change. For me, learning about that, it seems very much of what other people are doing, for example, to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And it seems very uninclusive of the people who are actually learning about it. It feels very much learning for a grade, not learning about the world we're about to enter. So what do you think can be done to kind of make learning focused about the actions of young people rather than learning about the actions of other people, that kind of separates young people from the world they're about to enter?
What do you think?
I think very much make it more action-based and kind of include personal actions in how you learn about things. So what young people can do to get involved in adapting to climate change, for example, and very much the policies that we could get involved in rather than kind of abstract policies that we only really learn about for a grade, because these are issues that we face a world that we will enter one day, and so are very important to us rather than just for a grade.
Yeah. So Caroline, also, I think you're proving exactly my point of my whole speech, is rather than for people to ask people like me questions, how should we change it? I think the answers lie very much within you, and each and every one of you so far and have indicated you've got great ideas of how to rethink and reshape and formulate the education in a way that basically to use your words, that you don't zone out, but that you actually are like, wow, this is really great. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Caroline. Rosa, do you want to share a final reflection or question?
Thank you. I really think that after the impact that COVID has had on our learning, I think that when we're going back into in-person school, we shouldn't be going back into the same kind of patterns that we were in before, and the teachers should be listening to our needs and wants to be able to kind of really like fit into what we think is the right teaching methods that are going to help us become, the phases of the future, I guess.
And why do you, can you formulate one of the patterns, because I think that's a really good way of formulating it, where you think, oh my goodness, can we perhaps change that? Let's all switch on and rethink some of these things. Is there something that comes to mind?
I mean, the repetitive lessons of kind of worksheets, and I think discussion is much better as you're kind of, it's hearing other people's opinions, which can affect your own, and you can bounce off each other, which I think is really helpful. Also, as you were talking about a questioning teacher, I think to hear their opinions as well, rather than just kind of the curriculums, is really helpful to us. Yes.
So Lucy, I think I'm really impressed. I think that, I hope, I can't see the ones listening to you. I hope that a lot of people are scribbling things down, I think just the four of you in just a few minutes are showing that this is precisely the point that I hope that we really are making a leap forward in listening more and enticing you to come up and with your thoughts and your ideas and giving them a platform, and that we actually do something with it. Because obviously, if we ask young people to think with us, how should we change things, that we should take that seriously and not put it aside and continue on the old ways, because that is kind of a gratuitous participation that I don't believe in. So I'm, again, impressed. I wish I would have been there with you, but I can feel your presence through the screen.
Thank you very much, Princess Laurentine. Is there anyone who would like to end with a final remark? Hugo.
Well, I'd like to end with two things. Firstly, on the subject of boring lessons, I can totally relate to that. It always really bugs me, especially in subjects like geography, when we're looking at data from 10 years ago or more, and looking at graphs, it really just doesn't feel relevant. And I think adding to both, to Rosa's point, it's really important that we're learning things that are relevant and things that are actually going to help us, not really outdated, old, boring graphs, because that's what causes us to disengage. My second point is on actually how we can help young people share their voices, because, while we're doing it here, we're only four of us, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people getting educated all around the world. And I really don't think at the moment there is that platform that young people can share their voices and their opinions, because this is obviously still quite a niche event. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on how we can make this, more commonplace, the dialogue between students and teachers and policymakers.
I think that's a really good note to end on, Hugo, thinking about that platform and how we bring it alive. Thank you very much to Princess Laurentine and to Hugo, Tendi, Caroline and Rosa.
Thanks to all of you, and I think that's a wonderful way to end this. It perhaps would have been an even better way to start it, but it's great to have had particularly the four of you, Princess Laurentine and Lucy, to do that. So thank you very much.